long time ago, and no, it's not in a galaxy far, far away for you Star Wars fans, but certainly on another continent, the young human population made a discovery. And by today's standards, this discovery was really rooted in common sense, but at the time it was profound. While they didn't realize it at the time, this discovery dramatically altered not just their lives, but every life that came after it. Let me, before I get more into that, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Again, Frank Agan. I moved to Columbus in 1984. I came here to go to law school. I do have a law degree. I came here from the state of Michigan. So if you're looking for a reason to dislike me, you need look no further than those two things. I haven't practiced law in 10 years. I do spend most of my time working with my organization, AM Spirit Business Connections. I won't talk a whole lot about that. If you're interested, see Randy Holloway. He'll get you a flyer. They have an open house here in town in a couple weeks. But I also do a fair amount of writing. I've written a number of books on professional networking. I have a different slant on professional networking, which I will get into. And I do a fair amount of what I call professional and public speaking. Now, they're the same programs, it's just sometimes I get paid and sometimes I don't, but that's the way of the world. But anyhow, back to this discovery. In the middle part of the 20th century, last century, the 1900s, sociological anthropologists, easy for me to say, were exploring a part of Tanzania known as the Aldavali Gorge, and they found hard evidence that the earliest humans, people just like me and you, 206 bones, same DNA running through their veins, those people, they worked together. It was all right there. They worked together to gather resources, they worked together to meet people, and they worked together to share knowledge. So it's clear that in working together, what they discovered, that they dramatically improved their chances of surviving by this cohesion. In short, these humans discovered that if they effectively worked with one another, they could survive longer in a hostile world. But in order for them to work together, they needed three things. They needed to know each other, they needed to like each other, and they needed to trust each other. Now this discovery predated language. This discovery predated the advent of the wheel and many tools. And if you think about it, this discovery predated the oldest profession. So I have to explain that. But if you fast forward, we've got a good crowd here. If you fast forward 200,000 years, give or take, and here we are today, much has changed. But one thing remains the same. Our prosperity, and not so much survival anymore, but our prosperity depends upon us working together. And us working together depends on three things. Us getting to know one another, us getting to like one another, and us getting to trust one another. So the balance of this program is going to be spent talking about those three things. And if you have to leave before I'm done, if you need to tune me out at any point in this, understand that what networking is all about. It's not about handshakes, it's not about 30-second commercials, it's not about spiffy catch lines, it's about knowing, liking, and trusting one another. And so what I'm going to talk on are things that you can do to get people to know you, like you, and trust you. First, never stop giving. In 2000, economist Arthur Brooks conducted a 30,000-person research study attempting to show a correlation between giving and success. In it, he demonstrated that on average, the average American, for every dollar they gave charitably, they increased their income $3.75. You can make more by giving more. Plain and simple. Who knew? Quite a revelation. And this is true. I see it every day. I see the people who give the most referrals end up getting the most referrals. And they don't totally understand why this is, but what they believe is that when you give more, you're happier. And when you're happier, it drives your confidence, it drives your initiative, it drives your intelligence, it drives your effectiveness, it drives a whole host of things that they're just beginning to uncover. So if you want to be more successful, look for ways to help other people. What I'm fond of saying is what you get from life, and what you give to life are somehow tied together by a string, you just can't see it. For example, your daughter gets a scholarship. That could be somehow related to a referral you gave last year. You can't see the connection, you can't figure it out. You land a great new client. That might be connected to one of the more many random acts of kindness that you did in the previous years. You stumble on a new star employee. It could be driven by something you did years ago. So focus on, as you're out there networking, focus on giving to other people. As you meet other people, as you talk to the people you know, have thoughts run through your head, through a filter in your head, and that filter keeps saying, how can I help this person? How can I help this person? How can I help this person? Because when you give, people can't help but know you, like you, and trust you. Second thing, every contact has opportunity. Right about 1999, I was working downtown. I was with a very large firm in downtown Columbus. And the only thing I owned at that point in my life, I was living in an apartment. Yeah, I had clothes, but the only real thing that I owned was a car. And it wasn't a great car. The car had one of these things. You did this, and the windows went down. You remember those things? That was my car. It was a red Chevy Cavalier, and I was really particular about my car. So I had to park downtown every day. I didn't want to pay a lot, and I didn't want to park too far from the office. And I didn't want to, I was just particular about where I was going to be. So I found a parking garage that was about 3 blocks from the office, and it was really inexpensive. And there's always a catch, right? And the catch at this particular parking garage was this, is that they parked your car. You gave them the keys and they parked the car. And I can tell you lots of wonderful stories about this parking garage, but I was a little unnerved about this, having a total stranger park my car. But what I realized is what I could do to become comfortable is get to know these people, have them get to know me. There were hundreds of attorney types coming and going from this parking garage, and I figure if they knew me, maybe I'd get a little extra treatment, better treatment. And again, they're wonderful stories, met wonderful people there. Some people I still know through Facebook. One guy, one of the parking lot attendants, asked me to be his best man one day, and I did. That's the funny part. And we're still friends on Facebook. But there was another woman there, and her name was Twyla. I don't think Twyla knew my name, because Twyla kind of called everybody honey, which I was fine with. She took the keys. Hey, how you doing, honey? And I just struck up a conversation with Twyla. Twyla was 37 years old at the time. I knew this from talking to her, just little short conversations. She had a daughter, she had a granddaughter. Every person, every woman, I'll be sexist, every woman loves to talk about their kids, loves to talk about their grandkids, and I could strike her into a conversation any which day. One day she stopped me. She knew I was an attorney type, and she said, how would you like to be an extra in a movie? I hated my job. Most people working in corporate America do. I hated my job. And I told her, sure, I'll be an extra in a movie. She said, well, they're shooting a movie up in Upper Sandusky, and they need attorneys to be extras in this movie. I'll do it. So I got all this information from her. A friend of mine, we got our pictures taken in front of all these law books, got in our car one Saturday, and we drove up to Mansfield for the casting. And we got to the casting room. It was about this size, and it was set up what I'll call Disney-esque. You're kind of doing the turnstiles up and down, and so you're talking to different people, but then the same people over and over, and would have conversations with these people. And as we're going through, they're talking about this movie. And it's a Stephen King movie. I never read Stephen King. I know nothing about Stephen King, and I don't care because I'm going to be in a movie. I might be discovered and not have to go back to my job, right? And at the whole point we're going through, we're thinking we're shoo-ins because they're looking for attorney types, and these guys are all bikers. This is great. So we're going along a little further, and somebody mentioned that the information's coming back through the line. Somebody mentioned that the title is Rita Hayworth. Well, the title of the movie was The Shawshank Redemption. And it was based on a short story that Stephen King had written called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. So I was cast as an extra in the Shawshank Redemption. How many people have not seen that movie? I usually bring a copy to hand out. Sorry. It's been years since I've run into somebody who hadn't seen that movie. It's a great movie. I didn't know it being in it. I got to hang out with Morgan Freeman for pretty much a whole day, which kind of. But anyhow, I got cast as a prisoner. In The Shawshank Redemption. I wasn't in the opening courtroom scene. I was cast as a prisoner. But it was a great day because I got to hang out with all these Hollywood types and go through this whole thing. I was in that opening scene. But the interesting thing about that, the point I'm trying to make, not that, hey, I'm a movie star, because I'm really not. The point I'm trying to make with all of this is we all have Twylas in our lives. We all have people that we could otherwise dismiss. I could have easily just walked away and never said anything to Twyla. There were hundreds of people that came and went from that parking garage every day, and I was the only one who got that opportunity. So stop and look around your life and ask yourself, who are the people I could be overlooking? Here's the reality, is that not everyone's going to be your next best client. Not everyone's going to be your next star employee. Not everyone's going to be your next valued vendor. But the reality is everybody knows somebody. I never would have guessed in a million years that she would connect me to a Hollywood blockbuster. But she did. Okay, moving on. There's no shame in asking. In 2001, specifically September 11th, I realized two things. We all did, but we all realized things. I realized two. One, even in today's civilized world, there's unspeakable evil. But the second thing I realized is that we as humans are hardwired to help one another. We really are. I mean, I remember watching television that day, and I was just totally enthralled with everything that was going on, with people helping one another, people lending shelter. There were people in Newfoundland who were just taking in plane loads of people who were stranded. All the planes were landed. There were homeless people who were helping people who were escaping for their lives from the Twin Towers. There were people walking miles and miles and miles home because all the mass transit was shut down, and there were people along the way helping. Calling loved ones for them, providing them aid. We are truly hardwired to help one another. The only thing separating you from the help you need is asking. Because quite frankly, everybody here needs something, and you're not going to get it unless you ask. We all have this, what I call a Lone Ranger persona. We want to do it on our own. And the reality is that we've done nothing alone. Everything you've ever achieved, everything you've ever put together in your life, how you got here today, involves somebody else. And the sooner you recognize that there are other people helping you, and reach out to them, the better off you're going to be. And the funny thing is that a lot of times we don't ask people for things in our networks because we feel like we're going to be imposing on somebody. They're going to be put out because we've asked them. But here's the great irony, is that when you ask somebody else for assistance, they are flattered. And when they're flattered, they can't help but know, like, and trust you that much more. Next thing, work to get involved. In late 1996, I was in private practice, and I was nearing the end of my second year of involvement with what's called the Ohio Business Brokers Association. It's a group of individuals, like realtors, that help people buy and sell businesses. I thought it was a great opportunity for a young attorney to get involved. I was really the only attorney that was there, that had joined the organization, and I met with a lot of people who were helping people, sell beer, wine, drive-thrus, software companies, all sorts of things. But at the end of the second year, I remember telling my wife, I said, you know what, I'm not going to join another year. I've been with this thing for 2 years, and I've got nothing. I went to every monthly luncheon, and nothing, not anything. And you know it's bad when everybody calls you buddy, and your name's not Buddy. That's hey buddy, how's it going? Occasionally I'd get a little bit of respect, and it would be, hey counselor, recognizing the fact that I was an attorney. But I went to this one last meeting, and at this one last meeting, the notion of the bylaws of the organization came up. And somebody said, we're a 6-year-old organization, and we need to really revisit our bylaws. We need to try and figure out what's going on. And so at that point, every head in the room turned towards Buddy, aka me, and the president of the association said, would you help us? You're the attorney, would you help us take care of these things? Look at our stuff, make sure we're on the straight and narrow with respect to our legal stuff. Not being someone to say no, I told them I would. I repaid my dues for a third year, and I went home and told my wife exactly what I'd done, and she was totally mystified about me. But anyhow, immediately things started to change. Immediately, I was transformed from Buddy to Frank. They got to know me. And then, after a time, they got to like me. It's hard not to like somebody who's committed to working with the things that you're committed to. It's hard not to like somebody when you start to learn about them and realize that I was just like them. I had a different profession perhaps, but I had electric bills to pay and cars to pay for and houses to pay for and clients that didn't pay me and all the same problems that they had. So they started to like me. And then they started to trust me. I'd get brokers calling me out of the blue saying, hey, we're working on a deal and this is what's going on and there's attorneys involved, but I just have some questions. And I would answer their questions. I wouldn't send a bill. That always helps. Don't send a bill when one's not warranted. I wouldn't send a bill. But then in time, they started sending me referrals. Lots of referrals. In fact, 2 years after I stopped the practice of law, I had a broker call me and said, I've got a deal to refer you. And I said, I can't take it. I said, I'm no longer, my license is no longer active. But that just goes to show you the power of getting involved. When you get involved, you demonstrate your commitment. And when you demonstrate your commitment, people can't help but know, like, and trust you. So stop and take a look at the organizations that you belong to, the chamber, and ask yourself, am I sufficiently involved? Here's the test. If you weren't here today, would you be missed? Ask yourself that question. If you wouldn't be missed, then you're not sufficiently involved. I would imagine there's plenty that can be done here. Just ask. There's, yep, look at the head shaking over there. There's plenty that can be done, and you can raise your level of exposure and you can get a whole lot out of it. But commit to getting involved. Don't just belong. Same thing with the church you go to, your kid's school, whatever it might be. Step forward and get involved because it pays big dividends in the end. One contact at a time. In 1929, Walt Disney had just completed what was known as Steamboat Willie. There was a short cartoon feature. It was unique in that it was the first to incorporate sound with animation. But producing the piece, producing Steamboat Willie was one thing. He was good at that. But getting somebody to actually show it, and remember, this is the time there's no computers, there's no internet, there's no YouTube. So to try and get your work out in the public, there was no way of really doing it. And so what he started to do is he started to go out and go to trade functions and start pitching it. And he pitched and he pitched and he pitched, and nobody really wanted to have anything to do with him. He was selling. And then one time, he wasn't pitching, he just struck up a conversation with a guy by the name of Harry Reichenbach. And Harry Reichenbach was a showbiz veteran. Now, the difference between pitching and a conversation is huge. A conversation is, well, it's not a pitch, but a conversation is the start of a relationship. And from that relationship, we build know, like, and trust. And Harry Reichenbach is the one who gave Walt Disney his start. He gave him a 2-week showing of this Steamboat Willie, and we know the history of Walt Disney Company. It all started there, and it all started really with a conversation with one person. And it started with not trying to pitch everybody in the room. Stop and think. Let me ask a quick question. Show of hands. How many people are married? All right, leave your hands up. Leave your hands up. If you're married, leave your hands up. Leave them up if you have more than one spouse. Okay, all right, I got no takers there. That's good. Now, I know there's a guy in Utah, he's got 17 wives, and God love him, and I know somebody tries to get away with it. I know there's laws on the books that says you can't, but here's the reality, is we only have one spouse because you can only have that sort of relationship with one person. And if you start to try and have that relationship with more than one, it just doesn't work. And it's the same thing with networking. It's the same thing with building know, like, and trust. What you need to do is you need to be more about quality and less about quantity. A lot of people here today, everybody's probably looking around and seeing somebody new, probably seeing multiple people new. You don't need to know them all. You don't need to meet them all today. Your goal is to meet one new person today. And not just meet them, but strike up a conversation, exchange cards, and have enough of a background that you can call later and say, let's go for a cup of coffee. Let's talk. One relationship at a time. You do that every month. You do that for a whole year. your network is going to start to grow, because you're not just the people you're meeting here, but the people they're going to start to introduce you to. Know, like, and trust is built one relationship at a time. So don't feel like you need to come here and walk away with 16 business cards. Just one. You only need one. Reconnect often. In 2011, 3 researchers gave 224 MBA students, executive MBA students. Executive MBA students are students that they're there on the weekend. They all come in from various parts of the country, and they're just at this MBA program, Ohio State, for example, just for the weekend. They're working at Procter & Gamble, Nationwide, name the company. So they're all coming in. So these 224 executive MBA students came in, and they were given an assignment. And the assignment was this: reach out to a dormant connection. And they defined the dormant connection as someone you've not had contact with in the last 3 years. And a lot of these MBA students, they started rolling their eyes like, oh, I gotta reconnect with Ed. Haven't seen Ed in a long time, and he was a train wreck when I knew him, or he was the fraternity drunk, or whatever it might be. And so they really weren't excited about this assignment, to reach out to their dormant connections. And what they were asked is, reach out to your dormant connection and try and get some help from them somehow, some way, on a project you're working on back in the office. So they all, well, I shouldn't say they all, many of these people went out and because there's always somebody who doesn't do the assignment, right? They went back and they went out and reached out to their dormant connections, and they came back and reported that they had gotten more from their dormant connections than they had from the people that they knew. And they were floored. Here's the reality: the people that you've lost touch with, their lives didn't stand still. Ed may have been the fraternity drunk, but he may have gotten his life together. Hopefully, got his life together. The Ed in my life did, and has moved on to great things. Had all sorts of experiences, has met all sorts of people that aren't in your network. So when you start looking to build your network, build your know, like, and trust, don't always focus on the new people. Stop and look at your Rolodex from the past. Look at people you've gone to high school with. Look to people you've gone to college with. Look to people from past jobs. Those people are a treasure trove of opportunity for you. Why? Because they already know you. How many people have been to a high school reunion in the last 5 years? I'm not going to ask the year. Last 5 years. You guys don't go to high school reunions? You go to a high school reunion. I went to a high school reunion. I won't say which one, and it was amazing. There were people I hadn't seen in, I won't say how many years, and it was like no time had passed. And the know, like, and trust is there. So if you want to try and create more know, like, and trust in your life, just build on the foundation you've already started with those people. Reach out and reconnect with people. Last thing, keep after it. In the summer of 1995, I worked for a firm. I worked for a firm downtown for 6.5 years. I left in the beginning of '95. I decided to leave. I wanted to do something more entrepreneurial than work for a big firm. I went on my own in the private practice law. Thought I would be a world beater. And like most of you have found, it's just tough to be in business. But anyhow, in 1995, in that summer, I was having lunch in the summer with a friend of mine who was a financial advisor. And for me, things were going okay. They were going okay. They were starting to move in the right direction, but I was a far cry from where I was. I had left a really good job, great salary, great benefits, great prestige. And I was sitting there at lunch with my friend, and I was kind of commiserating about, did I make the right decision? Did I make the right decision about going out on my own? I had a good thing there. And I was kind of commiserating to her, and she stopped me, and she told me a story. She told me a story about a speech that she gave 5 years earlier. She was a financial advisor. She gave a speech to a group of AT&T execs. And one of those AT&T execs had called her the week before our lunch and said, "Hey, Angie, I heard your speaking 5 years ago. I heard your speech. I heard your program 5 years ago. I didn't need you then. I need you now." And she went on to tell me about all the money this guy had. I mean, you were talking, 7-figure 401k, and he's connected to all these other execs who are retiring, and it was the mother lode for her. And when you're trying to feel sorry for yourself, The worst thing that can happen to you the worst thing that can happen to you in the world is when somebody's giving you good news about themselves, right? She's going on and telling me about all this great news she has, and I didn't say it, but I know it was on my face, and what was on my face was, oh, goody for you. And the reason I know that is because she stopped me and she said, Frank, you don't understand. You haven't been doing something for 5 years to have things come back to you. You've been doing this 6 months. You know what? And she was right. Because 5 years after that point, things were happening to me. I'm standing here today because if I had a Coke with Mark Matthews, I don't know how many years ago. We don't even need to get into that, do we? It was a long time ago. I had a Coke with Mark Matthews at the McDonald's and Shell station on 256, I guess. However many years ago. And that set that relationship in motion. I'm going to meet somebody today, and something's going to come from it sometime down the line. I just know it. I just trust it. The reality is this with respect to developing know, like, and trust and keeping after it, is that developing know, like, and trust, it's not an event, it's not an activity, it's really a lifelong pursuit. Stop and think about it. One day you're going to die, and you're going to have 6 people carry your casket. So you're going to need to have relationships long beyond your lifetime. So in concluding, let me say this. Networking works. It might not work how you want it to work, but it works. So for example, you're here today and you're hopeful of making that key client contact. You don't find one, but you get a great tip on some software that helps you save payroll money. Networking worked. It might not work where you want to work. Again, you're here today, you want to make that key contact, nothing comes from it. You leave here, you got to stop and gas up the car, you're standing in line to pay, and you run into somebody who's a great prospect. Networking worked. It might not work when you want it to work. You're here today trying to find a contact, nothing comes from it. 2 years from now, somebody you met here today calls you and says, hey, I didn't need you then, I need you now. Networking worked. Networking does work, but it depends on, just as our ancestors found out all those years ago, it depends on being known, liked, and trusted. Today I've given you some ideas on making that happen. Get after it. Thank you.